Welcome back to my darkroom. Today we're going to look at print developer Kodak D-166, which the darkroom cookbook describes as a red-brown print developer. Now when you read that section of the book, we're promised a very warm tone print developer that produces red to brown tones depending on how we develop it. So we'll see if that rings true with modern papers. Now I don't know if ADOX or FOMA will produce different results than Ilford. You'll have to try that out and let me know. Now we're going to look at the ingredient list in just a moment, but as far as the procedure goes, I'm going to try two different developing times, whereas previous videos I just did the one developing time because that's pretty much the general use for that paper. Here the formula is supposed to change the color of the print depending on how long you allow it to process. So I'm going to do one set of prints at a 2-minute developing time, which is the same as Dektol, and then I'm going to do another set of prints that uses a 6-minute developing time, and we'll see how that turns out, if we have any difference in color, tone, or anything like that. So let's go ahead, take a look at the ingredient list and see how to mix this up. To 750 milligrams of hot water, add 0.6 grams of metol, 12.5 grams sodium sulfite, 4.2 grams hydroquinone, 17.6 grams sodium carbonate monohydrate, 6.2 grams potassium bromide. Add to this enough water to make 1 liter and dilute 1 part stock to 1 part water. Here is our Ilford Classic Dektol reference print. So now let's look at the D-166 on Classic with a 6-minute developing time. Okay. It is remarkably warmer. I mean, it is clearly a warmer print. I can see it in every shade of gray, from the blacks to the highlights. It's actually a very beautiful tone on Classic paper. It's not nearly as green as the warm tone paper, but it still gives you a warm tone. I actually like this combination quite a bit. I don't know if I would do it all the time, but this is a nice combo. I had said previously you can't change the color of Classic. Clearly I'm wrong. We'll talk about the why here in a little bit when we wrap up. But 6-minute developing time, clearly a nice paper. Color is really great. All right. Now, I also did a 2-minute developing time. And here we go. So, Classic, 2-minute developing time. A 2-minute developing time gives a warmer tone than the 6-minute developing time. And that's what this developer is supposed to do. The longer you develop, the more tone you can, or the more variation in tone. Shorter times, warmer tone. So 6 minutes cooled it down. It was the same exposure at 6 minutes as the Dektol. This is a longer exposure, shorter development. So the contrast is a little lower. I can see that here. But the tone is warmer. I would actually say the contrast is lower because 2 minutes may actually be too short. I don't think the blacks got fully developed in 2 minutes. I think 3 minutes would change the color too much, so a 2.5-minute time probably would have been good, but I've already used up a lot of paper making these test prints, so I didn't explore further. but the tone is definitely warmer than the 6 minute. So let's look at the 6 minute one more time. Okay, here's the 6. Not as warm as this, but definitely warmer than this. Okay, so I think the 6 minute, or maybe a 4 or 5 minute, might be like perfect for this. The 2 minute, I don't know, there's a lot happening here. Not just the warmer tone, but the lower contrast. The 2 may just be a little too short, but you can experiment with that. But this just goes to show what kind of variation you can get. Okay, let's see the effect on the warm tone stuff. Okay, our warm tone Dektol reference print and our D-166 6 minute developing time. This is a touch warmer. I can see that contrast, exposure exactly the same, or density. It is the same exposure time, aperture and so forth, but I am getting a warmer tone here than with the Dektol. But a problem, and you may see it, is right here. I have never had a print do this before. This is the only one that's done it. And that is the emulsion is coming off. Now, none of the other prints exhibited that. They were processed in the same solutions. My prints were shuffled through the second fixer, hypoclear, and whatnot. And that is where I was touching it. But none of the other prints exhibited this. It could be just a blemish on one paper. I didn't make another print to see if it would happen. It could be the longer development time in this particular formula softened the gelatin too much. I noticed it occurred in the second fixer or the fixer remover. I can't remember which one. But I would say if you want to do this formula for 6 minutes, use a hardening fixer. I did not use a hardening fixer, and that may harden the gelatin enough to make it more durable. But I noticed in this case, it did start to separate from the base, but only in this formula so far, and only the 6 minute long developing time. All right, here is the 2 minute. And we are clearly warmer here. It's not quite the brown that is advertised in the Darkroom Cookbook for the description, but it is definitely warm, and it doesn't seem as green as some of the other formulas on the warm tone paper. At least under this lighting, it doesn't. But again, as I've said before, I believe in the last video, a little bit of a weak dilution of selenium tone may take some of the green out without getting rid of the warmth. But in this case, it is lower contrast. Just like the Classic, it probably could do more with a 2.5 minute developing time to get the blacks in a little bit more. This particular formula, 2 minutes, definitely no less than that. I noticed that this paper, both Classic and warm tone, the image does not even begin to emerge, even in the darkest shadows, until the first minute has passed. So it takes a whole minute before you start to see anything come out at all. So 2 minutes, definitely the shortest time I'd ever try. I could, if I felt longer developing times cooled the color down too much, I could try upping my contrast. Otherwise, I would probably just try this for 2.5 minutes and see if that did it. Otherwise, it is a pretty good color. If you want a warm tone, this does it really, really well without getting into yellow paper. I've used some Forte in the past, Forte warm tone, and the creamy yellow paper just didn't do it for me. So I like the white paper that Ilford uses, but the warm tone of the photo So D-166, you can find it in Darkroom Cookbook and other places. Definitely came out nice and warm, depending on how long you developed it. So let's take these off and talk about why as we wrap up. And there you go. So with the 6-minute developing time, we got a cooler image tone, but it's still much warmer than Dektol, even though it's the same ingredients. Then when we use a 2-minute developing time, we get an even warmer image. But we have to make a longer exposure to make sure we get there. Now, I had lower contrast in both kinds of paper when I used the 2-minute developing time. As I mentioned before, the image didn't even begin to emerge until after 1 minute in the developer. So it could be we'll get full contrast with a short development time at 2.5 minutes. I didn't test it out because I was already using up a lot of paper and I wanted to move on. Now, why do we have such a different look, even though the ingredients are exactly the same as Dektol? Well, it has to do with proportion. The main factor that makes the image warm is the potassium bromide. Now, potassium bromide in this formula is nearly 6 times the amount as what's in Dektol. So that really pushes everything towards the warm end of the scale. They also pull back the sodium carbonate, and that contributes to a slightly warmer image. So more potassium bromide, a little bit less sodium carbonate, much warmer image. And then of course, the developing time changes tone too. Shorter time, warmer tone. There you go. So if you want a super warm image tone, D-166, definitely a good choice. Just play around with the times to see what you like in terms of color. But it definitely came out to a warm tone. I feel like the Ilford Classic paper in 166 almost gets to a look that's similar to the warm tone paper in Dektol. It got that much warmer. Not quite there, color's a little bit different, but it's pretty darn close. So if you want to really play with warming up classic paper, that's a good choice. So thanks again for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you next time.